or something like that basis. We require your permission to record this session. This program is being organized under the auspices of the International Pragmatics Association. And we've called it the IPrA or IPrA Mentoring Webinar on Academic Publishing. Now, it has the assent of the Consultation Board of the International Pragmatics Association. And the team that has been working on this include Neil Norick. Neil is a very familiar name in pragmatics. Also, Melissa Moya. Melissa, if you say hi, then we can see you.
Hello, everyone. I'm from Spain at the Autónoma University, and welcome here.
Thank you, Melissa. That's Melissa. And we have been supported by the Secretary General, Jeff Vesheran and Anne Verhat. We are very privileged today to have 3 facilitators for this session. But before I introduce them, let me just quickly run through the rules that we're going to work with today. So I would like everyone to mute their microphone when they are not speaking, so that we do not get interference and there. So please mute your microphone when you are not speaking. You may also turn off your videos if you are not speaking, so that we get the good quality sound and video. The facilitators will have their videos on when it's their turn to speak. And then when we have the Q&A session, we will all have our videos on. I mean the facilitators and the moderator. Which is myself. I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Nanaba Appiah Amfo. I'm at the University of Ghana, and I've been part of the team working together to make this happen. So today we have 3 facilitators who will take turns to address salient aspects of today's topic, and then it will be followed by a Q&A session. We've already received a few questions. We will put that to the facilitators during the Q&A session, and we will also allow for live questions. We also encourage you to put your question in the chat room. We'll be monitoring those and put them across to the facilitators. So at this point, I would like to introduce our facilitators. Each of them will talk for about 15 to 20 minutes on different aspects of academic publishing. And then we will have a 30-minute Q&A session. Altogether, the session is expected to last for up to 90 minutes. So now let me introduce our facilitators. I will start with Tommaso Milani. Tommaso Milani is currently Professor of Multilingualism at the University of Gothenburg in Sweden. He's co-editor with Susanne Elgericht of the journal Language in Society. His areas of expertise include multilingualism, critical discourse analysis, as well as language, gender, and sexuality. Tommaso, can you say hello?
Hello, everyone. Very excited to be here.
Thank you very much. We are happy to have you too. And next, I will introduce Bádélé Kambon. Bádélé is at the Institute of African Studies here at the University of Ghana. And his areas of interest include historical linguistics and serial verb nominalization. And he is the editor-in-chief of the Ghana Journal of Linguistics. Bádélé, can we see you? Say hello to us.
Glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And Prof. Amfo is my former supervisor, by the way, who is now Vice Chancellor of University of Ghana. So I'm always proud to be a part of anything that he invites me to.
We were hoping to keep that quiet. Thank you, Bádélé. And so I would like to now introduce Sari Pietikäinen. I hope I did a good job at that, Sari.
Very good.
Great. So Sari is Professor of Discourse Analysis at the University of Jyväskylä, Finland, and also a visiting professor in several other universities in Ireland, Canada, and the USA. She's interested especially in power and language, for example, in context of multilingualism, minority languages, knowledge production and commodification of natural resources in the Arctic. And she's editor-in-chief for Journal of Sociolinguistics and is serving on at the editorial boards of several journals in our field. And these include International Journal of the Sociology of Language, Language Policy, Language in Society, and Linguistic Landscape. So, dear participants, you see that we have a very competent panel. All of these have years of experience with editorial work for our journals. And we will start the session with Sari. Sari will speak to us about the scientific aspects of, the salient aspects of a scientific article. And then she will also touch on how to get an article published expected standards. And after her, we will have bádélé talk about choosing the right journal. And Tommaso will come in with dealing with reviewers' comments. So, Sari, over to you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for this great invitation. It is really my great pleasure and honor to be here tonight. And I'm very much looking forward to our conversation today. I will start off by talking a little bit about the different elements of a scientific article that is intertwined also with the criteria how an article might be published. And I start, but then my colleagues will contribute and add on as well. So I will start to share my screen so that you will be able to see. I hope that you are seeing now a PowerPoint slide.
Yes, we can see the slides. Yeah.
Good, thank you. So I'm assuming that what we all share tonight is that we wish, or we are in a progress of writing a scientific article for a peer-reviewed journal. And when we were discussing with my colleagues and I was thinking about and reflecting back the processes, I thought that maybe the three aspects are key elements of any peer-reviewed article, scientific article. First, that it has to contribute to something new, a new knowledge to the field. And within your publication, there needs to be an argument that is based on your research. So it is not an anecdotal observation about something, or it's not a repetitious element of something that you have already produced somewhere else. It is about a new knowledge that you produced based on your research. The other aspect that I personally find that it's kind of a helpful element of scientific article, that it has a relatively stable package, a genre, that helps us to know what to include, what they might entail, how they might be organized, and it helps also us to evaluate whether everything is there or is something missing. And then there is, of course, the third element, the audience, to whom you are writing this to, with whom you are wishing to have a conversation about, in which particular field you are wishing to make a contribution with this particular article that you are writing about. So let's dive in and look a little bit more closer what this might entail. So what I wanted to put forward here is that the key element, a core element of any scientific article is that it has to have an argument. Usually only there is room for one argument. So one argument that is backed up by new scientific knowledge that arrives from your research. And that is the core element. So in that way, the article is different from a review or a short research note or something else that we are writing about. It really needs to have an argument. And I think this is sometimes really challenging, at least myself, when I'm writing articles. It seems to me that so many things are connected to each other, and it takes a lot of work to try to really massage that. What is that argument that I am able to do in this particular article? I would say that there's only room for one core argument, because that argument needs to be rooted in the relevant previous research in the field. So no research, no argument lives in bubble or in isolation. So you need to have the previous research, the published work, the key concepts with which you are making connections with your own argument. So the theoretical framing of your argument, your theoretical home. Then your argument needs to be sufficiently and convincingly supported by the evidence from your research. So it's not enough just to describe, or it is not enough to just argue. You also need to back up your claim, your argument. And there needs to be something new that your article is contributing to, a new information, a new understanding. Sometimes it might be a new methodological innovation or policy innovation. And to think, of course, we all think that our own research is always new and always unique. And of course, this is true in one sense. But from a point of view of journal articles, the article needs to contribute to something that is beyond the uniqueness of your research context. It needs to make a contribution to the field. And lastly, but not leastly, an article needs to be written in a clear, logical, and ethical way. We need to be able to understand what is your message and how you are arguing for that. It needs to be clearly structured. An ethical way refers to multiple things. It means that the research that you are drawing on is done by ethics, guiding our research in our local conditions. But it needs to be ethical in a way as well that you give credit to whom it's owed to. So you make explicit the references through references whom you are drawing onto and make the connections. And also that it's ethical in terms of plagiarism and repetitious publications that are then explicated in the journal websites, for instance. So then we can see that the other aspect, the lack of these elements, would then mean that that article still needs work. So if it's unclear to us, to the reader, what is the argument, what this article is about, then it needs more work. So quite often, at least I feel that when I'm reading articles that I'm finding a lot of interesting elements in it, but it's unclear to me, what is this article about? It seems to be about this and that and that and that. There are sometimes the articles are not sufficiently engaging with the previous relevant work. And here there is a link with the scope of the journal that you are targeting that we are going to discuss today, I think in more detail. But maybe this can be also taken as a helpful tip for yourself. So there is so much published work around, and that it might be sometimes hard to decide what are the most relevant previous work for my argument. So maybe the scope of the journal helps you there. So for instance, the journal that I work with is within the field of sociolinguistics. So our expectations would be that you engage with sociolinguistic research, previous sociolinguistic research. And same goes for other journals as well. So depending on their profile and scope, that would give you a hint what kind of a relevant work you are expected to engage with. We are also looking for substantial analysis, that you show what you analyze and what you find, not descriptive or anecdotal kind of a bypassing comments about your data. or that the data is very, very small so that it doesn't lend to a substantial analysis, or that there are claims that this and that is happening in your research, but you are not showing that to us, so then it would be unsupported claims. And that the text is written in a way that it is hard for us to understand. It is hard to follow. Maybe it is very repetitious, or the argument is not clear, or it's hard to follow. And maybe the tip here is to try to think the scale and scope of your writing so that it is in a right scale for an article, and the scope fits with the journal that you are doing, that, and also that the scope goes kind of like deep enough that it's not descriptive, but engaging and making an argument with support. And then we can look kind of turning this to the idea of genre that, at least to me, is familiar with from the discourse studies. But you can think about genre like as a general idea, a structure that helps you. We can think about genre of different movies or different music, or even different sports. So of course there is variety between different genres, and then the particular genre can be applied differently. But here I have tried to tease out that kind of elements that are typical to a scientific article in our fields. So the article have a title that in an ideal case is catching the interest of your reader and claiming your point, or kind of a marking what this is, what the topic is about. Abstract and keywords are very important summaries of your article, because especially nowadays online search, this is what people get free access to and are able to find your article. And I think here what is really important is to check that actually the abstracts and the keywords that you are using make strong link with the actual content of your article. Because I think sometimes when we write the abstracts and keywords and the article, maybe there is a time difference and they don't actually match very well to each other. An introduction to your article is kind of like giving a map to your reader. This is the terrain that I'm going to cover in this article. Within this field and with this kind of a topic and data, this is the argument that I'm going to make. The theoretical framing of your argument is the literature, the previous work that you are drawing on and using in your article, and it's a way of rooting your argument. And here is a strong link to the journal that you are aiming to targeting with your article, so that you use those references and that kind of a thinking, you engage that kind of a conversation that is relevant within the scope of that journal. On the other hand, you can also look at your theoretical framing and think about what journal might be interested in this kind of a engagement. Maybe you are crossing over fields and you are engaging with this one and that one, and you have multiple options then there. The data and methods section in the article is there to provide sufficient information for your reader so that they can understand the grounds that you are making your argument. So what kind of a data, what kind of a moment in time and space, what is limitations of the data. So there is a very concrete elements included, like how much and how it was gained, and also how the data was then analyzed, and if there are any ethical issues that we should be aware of. Then the results. Again, that's a really important and very often very interesting part of the article, where you are invited to show your evidence for your argument, not just describing it, but truly engaging with it and showing how you are building your argument and your claims. The discussion and conclusion, sometimes they are two separate sections, sometimes they are together. It depends on the tradition of that subfield or that journal. But here I'm talking about them together. So that is the moment for you to explain your findings, why they matter, how do they connect with other research or other processes, and what kind of explanations might explain your findings. Maybe you make suggestions there for, let's say, for educational innovations or policy documents or future research. And then there are references included. So while the journals do differ, what kind of elements can be combined, these are usually the core elements of any scientific article. But a good tip for you is to, on the one hand, check the author guidelines that most of the journals do provide on their websites. And they can also very explicitly explain what do they want to see. How long the article should be, how to deal with the data extracts and visuals, for instance. Many journals, like Journal of Sociolinguistics is one of them, also provide a separate document that tries to describe it's titled How to Publish with Us. So it describes even more detail what kind of arguments and what kind of cases we are looking for. And giving tips how to frame and work with your article if you are aiming for that particular journal. Another resource available to us when we are thinking about where to publish or how to write our article is to look for those articles that have published in journals that you are interested in, or maybe there are articles that you find very convincing or engaging. And you can try to analyze what kind of elements they have, how they have argued their claims, how they have described their data, how they are balancing between showing the data and making the claim, what kind of discussions and conclusions they are drafting or writing in their articles. So as a way of ending this short talk, I want to kind of show you the idea of stars in the skies. So there are lots of stars in the sky, and they are all really interesting, and they make really interesting constellations. But when we are writing an article, we need to choose one star, the brightest one, and write your story around it, with an understanding that that star is it belongs that widest constellation and belongs to the sky that is bigger than one star. But through the story of that one star, we are able to understand something about the bigger picture as well. So I will end there and open the floor to my colleagues if you want to add on something, Tommaso or Venno.
Yeah, thank you, Sari, for pointing out that bright star to us. So we'll have bádélé coming now, and then Tommaso will follow. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Prof. Amfo. Can I be heard? Okay, great. And I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can everyone see my screen as well? All right, great.
Yes.
So, all right, thank you so much. So thank you once again for the opportunity. So as mentioned, I'm the editor-in-chief of Ghana Journal of Linguistics, and I'll be speaking today on choosing the right journal for this IPrA online seminar dealing with the art and science of academic publishing. And I want to start with something that is near and dear to my heart, which is avoiding predatory journals. And here you see the little image here. Some people aren't who they say they are. And this is a major issue in terms of some time ago, someone applied for a job where I work at the University of Ghana Institute of African Studies. And the person seemed qualified, seemed very articulate, But when we went through his past publications, the majority of them were in predatory journals. And these are journals with names like International Journal of, Psychology, International Journal. A lot of these have, these grandiose sounding, but vague names. So I want to go into just a brief anecdote that I'll share with you about an experience that I had very recently with a predatory journal. And this was a journal that was actually on AJOL, which is where my own journal, Ghana Journal of Linguistics, is also hosted. And I had two articles that I was writing with two separate, authors. And independently, both of them came across this journal, and it looked, legitimate and everything. It was on African Journals Online. So, we expected that it would be of a certain level of quality. But unfortunately, in the submission process, we got these emails. So my co-author was told, you're requested to pay a sum of 20,000 Naira to the editor-in-chief of that journal. So my co-author, he was asking them, what is it for, so forth and so on. They said, oh, there are costs to print here, there's this, there's that, so forth and so on. So it seemed like things weren't quite adding up. And another co-author independently, so this is May 12th, 2021, that he got that. And then April 15, 2021, another author who I was co-authoring a paper with had also submitted, and it was the same thing. So this is the editor-in-chief and his own personal bank account number, again, for 20,000 Naira. Now, there's a term in Nigeria called 419, which is basically scamming, swindling, hustling, and things of that nature. And what we did, and both of these were younger scholars, and they asked me to intervene. So I sent an email, telling them, it smacks of predatory journals. And in both cases, they said, oh, we'll waive the fee, but they ended up publishing the papers with absolutely zero peer review. It was submitted 1 week, and then within a week, it was, ready for publication, basically. This was May that it was submitted. By June, it's out on the website, published. And we ended up spending 10 months of effort to try to get the articles taken down so that we could submit it to legitimate journals. And we had to basically call for AJOL, Susan Murray there to intervene. And one of my co-authors, he actually cited a proverb in his language. He's from the Kasana Nankani people. And basically it went that if the ruler's wife is caught with someone else in bed, then he may not punish them, he may just let them go. Basically, the idea was that rather than, causing a big sting, it would cause embarrassment to him. And that seemed to be the issue that we were dealing with here. But eventually, to come to the conclusion on this aspect, what we ended up having to do, I had to go to COPE, that's Committee on Publication Ethics website, and then go into look at the source code for the submission page in order to find what their email addresses are, because that information isn't readily accessible. And then I had to copy them on the email that provided the same information that I provided to AJOL, so forth and so on. So after 10 months of effort from July 10th, 2021, where we asked for our articles to be withdrawn so that we could submit to reputable publishers, we didn't get any type of resolution. But within 50 minutes of sending an email where we copied COPE, and we said that we're copying COPE because AJOL is supposed to be a member of COPE, we got both of those articles withdrawn. That was April 6, 2022 at 9:08. I sent the email copying COPE, and by 9:58 a.m., we had finally gotten a response where this thing was addressed. And I'm happy to say that one of those articles is already out in a reputable journal, Legon Journal of the Humanities, which is published here at the University of Ghana. And the other one is it's actually under peer review right now through Brill, Journal of Religion in Africa. But we had
basically, because of this whole thing with this predatory journal, this wolf in sheep's clothing, we were basically in a situation where we were basically going to have to just get rid of 2 articles, jettison 2 articles. These 2 articles were going to be worthless to us. But by following up, you know, this was how we were able to at least have an opportunity where now those articles have been withdrawn and now we can submit them to legitimate journals. So why do I bring this up? I also do what's referred to as combat sciences, what they call so-called martial arts. And sometimes my students will ask me, well, what's the best way to get out of this choke? Or what's the best way to get out of this position? What's the best way? And what I often tell them is the best way is never to get into that situation in the first place. Don't allow yourself to get into that choke in the first place. And in this case, the best thing is never to deal with a predatory journal in the first place. And the rest of what I speak about is going to deal with not just predatory journals, but coming back to the core of what I want to talk about, how to choose the right journal. And one of the first things that I want us to consider is to make sure that your paper fits within the scope of the journal. And as I was doing research for the presentation, I came across a couple of good web pages, one from Taylor and Francis and the other one from bmj.com, dealing with how to choose a journal. So a lot of what I talk about is derived from some of these resources. So you can check those out yourself if you're looking to read more comprehensively on what I will be speaking about today. So one of the first things you want to do, you want to tailor your article to potential journals. And one thing that you can do even before you start writing, and different people have different methods and procedures that they follow in their writing, but one thing you can do is choose potential journals ahead of writing. So if, for example, I know that I want to write, you know, or publish an article with Ghana Journal of Linguistics, then I may look at other articles that have been published. Is it general? Is it specific? Is it going to be something that is going to be favorable to syntax papers, pragmatics papers? In our case, for Ghana Journal of Linguistics, it's not exclusively pragmatics. Pragmatics papers are welcome, but it tends to be more towards core, what some people would regard as core linguistics papers. You know, dealing with syntax, phonetics, phonology, morphology, so forth and so on. But again, some other papers are dealing with second language acquisition. Other papers are dealing with, you know, discourse analysis, so forth and so on. So we do have that. And then also you can think about it, and this is something that we discussed in the run-up to the seminar. Consider that what you're doing is you're joining a conversation already going on in the journal, right? So we had a discussion about, you know, this idea of gaps, and that may come up again. But, you know, there's the idea of, all right, is there really a gap? Should you think of what you're doing as filling a gap, or should it be seen as joining a conversation? In the case, for example, when I was doing my PhD thesis, there was a lot of literature out there on serial verbs, and there was a lot of literature out there on nominalization, but there was comparatively, you know, few, I should say, articles or works dealing with serial verb nominalization, how serial verbs are made into nouns. So that became, you know, there were some scholars like Prof. Adams Bodomo, so forth and so on. But this was basically a gap, you know, a place where I was able to fill a niche, while at the same time we could see it as joining a conversation between some of the scholars who had published. But this is essentially similar to what Sari had mentioned. You're going to basically try to see how you fit in there into that conversation. Other conversations, you can consider format of the journal. You can consider word limits. If you have something that's already 20, 25 pages, you may not want to go to a journal that recommends no more than, you know, say 10 to 15 pages, because you may lose too much that you consider to be valuable to your argumentation. Another thing to consider is assessing the credentials of the journal or publisher. Now, one thing you can do is look at, all right, is this journal indexed? Is it indexed in, you know, places that you respect and that are respected generally in academia? So Scopus and Web of Science, for example, In our case, we looked at age-all, but unfortunately, there was a quality control issue in the anecdote that I mentioned before. But these are some of the things that you can look at in terms of the journal. You can target specific journals. Once again, you can build a short list of journals based on credentials for which you're looking. You can look at things such as the impact factor. Some people, really are heavy in terms of metrics. Others, you may look at a journal, especially for early career researchers, that isn't necessarily, all right, this is the highest impact factor in all of them. This is language, this is whatever. But, sometimes metrics can play a factor in terms of the journal you select, sometimes not. Another thing to do, look at indexes like Google Scholar, JSTOR, EBSCOhost, and other databases. If the journals are reflected there, it could tell you something just in terms of, okay, this is a legitimate journal perhaps. Also, you can browse the content that they publish for quality and relevance to your field. With that, you can research and cross-check. Various things you can do. You can speak to colleagues, supervisors, and your librarians. Check where respected scholars publish. So if, for example, you are introduced to a paper, an article, a book, whatever the case may be, in the course of your coursework, or you're reading a scholar, even your own supervisor, sometimes you can go down to the references and see who are they referencing and where are those people who they're referencing publishing. Where are my supervisors publishing? All of those types of things. Where are my colleagues who may be professors and associate professors publishing? And that may lead you to good places. You can look at calls for papers. You can explore journal suggester tools. And then also what you want to do in terms of your own research and cross-check, you want to understand the audience. So if, for example, this is an audience where all of the papers are in pragmatics, I may not want to go into, Pratt phonetics, waveforms and so forth and so on per se, right? So what is the, or who rather is the audience of the journal where I want to publish? And then you can also look at the publishing options in that whole range, in that field. And then also understand how the journal's performance is measured. And these are things alluded to previously in terms of impact factor, so forth and so on. Another thing you can do, look for red flags. You can check the quality of their website. For me, if I see, a predatory journal, oftentimes these are journals, and not to, prejudice any specific place, but places like India, you can see places like, unfortunately, Nigeria has a bad name in some of these regards. But these are not clearly the only places, because oftentimes, even if a journal is published out of a place that may not necessarily be seen in whatever regard, oftentimes those places will pretend to be in other places. So you'll have a journal called the British Journal of, Pragmatics, but is headquartered in Bangalore, somewhere. It's headquartered in New Delhi somewhere. So you can find those types of things that would be red flags that, okay, it's called American Journal of this, but it's not actually hosted in America or has a fake address and things of that nature. So these are things that you can look at. Sometimes these red flags jump out at you. Other times they are not necessarily so apparent. And then also you can check what tools and services the journal offers to authors. For example, online submission, article handling interfaces. Now, some journals accept submissions via email. For me, as soon as I started as editor-in-chief of Ghana Journal of Linguistics, I transitioned directly to OJS, Open Journal Systems, because I said, if it's up to me checking emails in order to make this journal flourish and grow and expand, then we might as well call it quits right now, because there's no way I would be able to handle a deluge of emails. So these are some of the things. Are there pre-review recommendations from the editorial board or the editor-in-chief, co-editor, so forth and so on? Is there a robust peer review process? Is it double-blind peer review? Is it, single? I may know who, or let's say the reviewer may know who the author is, but the author doesn't know. or is it open where both sides know who it is? This is something that is gaining momentum among some, where they say it doesn't need to be double blind. Let's actually see what's going on. But you need to be very clear on the policy of that journal ahead of time. Is there also a copy editing stage? Reputable journals would give you a chance to go back and look at things before they publish it. Again, predatory journals, they will get your manuscript and then they'll publish it. There may be typos in there. There may be things that are formatted incorrectly, but they will never give you a chance to see it again because they're trying to get that 20,000 naira, which is the equivalent of $50, which is a nice supplement to someone's income if you can publish 20, 30 papers in a single issue. Also look at, is there a production stage? What does the publishing look, what does that look like? Is it all digital? Is it in print? So forth and so on. Most journals, well, let me not say most, a lot of journals are digital only. And by the time I started as editor-in-chief of Ghana Journal of Linguistics, we had already been digital format only. And then also, is there a built-in system for recommending alternate journals, such as transfers? So for example, I know that there are SAGE journals, for example, and others. That's one that comes to mind, where if the journal says that what you're writing is outside of their scope, they may transfer it or give you the opportunity to transfer to another journal. Another thing to keep in mind is that you want to submit your research to one journal only. We actually had a situation where a colleague submitted to Ghana Journal of Linguistics, but then they submitted somewhere else, and then they it ended up getting published somewhere else first. When we found that out, that person ended up being banned for life, right, from Ghana Journal of Linguistics because they were being intentionally duplicitous. They knew that that was against the policy and just generally against ethics of many, journals and standards that are out there, but they decided to do that. And this was already mentioned in terms of transfers to other journals. So if you do decide on one journal, but it doesn't fit, that journal itself may recommend, oh, well, you can submit here because it's more within the scope of this sister journal also published through, SAGE or Brill or wherever the case may be. And then also one thing that is major for me, make sure that you follow the instructions, for authors very carefully. So if you follow the instructions, sometimes you'll have someone who will submit to the journal and it's clear that they've never looked at a single article. One, even though since 2015, we've only offered online submissions, they will submit by email. To those, I'll just say, kindly follow submission guidelines. I'll just have like that one sentence, which means that they're going to actually have to finally go to our website and then see the author guidelines, which are published in the back cover of every issue. So these are just things to keep in mind. So I know that my time is short. These are just some salient points that I hope, more than being comprehensive, and this is the end all be all, I hope it can spark some discussion and further Q&A so that we can get deeper into the subject. And again, I hope this has been helpful and I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you, bádélé. I love the way you're all keeping to time. So finally, we will have Tommaso come in, and then we can have the discussion.
Thank you so much. So I will talk a little bit about how to engage with reviewers' comments. And this is something that can be quite scary. I will also talk a little bit about the reviewing process. I know that what I'm going to say might sound fairly banal for many of you who are experienced writers and who have submitted articles to journals before, but I think it's always good to kind of demystify, let's say, the scaffolding behind journals, right? So first of all, I want to say, remind everyone that I'm the co-editor with Susan Ehrlich of Language in Society. Language Society was founded over 50 years ago by Del Heim. So it's one of those kind of big journals in the field that have been around for quite some time. So I'm also want to read very briefly the aim and scope of the journal. And the reason why I am going to read the aim and scope of the journal is that a lot of the assessment that our reviewers make, is on the basis of these aims and scope, So Language Society is an international journal of sociolinguistics concerned with language and discourse as aspects of social life. The journal publishes empirical articles. So we do not publish literature reviews. We do not publish articles that are purely theoretical. However, we only publish articles that are empirical in nature, so they have some detailed analysis of data, but on the basis of the detailed analysis of data, they make theoretical, comparative, or methodological arguments. So, as Sari already mentioned in her presentation, so some articles might be just interesting empirically, so just the data is interesting. And that's not gonna fly high in Language in Society. In Language in Society, you will need to have interesting data, analyze interesting data, but then contribute to make a bigger argument and contribute to current theoretical discussions or methodological discussions in sociolinguistics. So it's always important to remember that the review process is not something that has been put in place to kind of ruin you or to ruin your life or to make your life hell, right? The review process should be seen as a dialogue. And it's a bit of a dialogue that is with someone who is the editor or the editors who kind of manage this dialogue, right? And I'm gonna speak only on behalf of me and Susan, so I cannot speak on behalf of all journal editors, right? But the editor is a bit in the middle, right? The editor then chooses the best possible reviewer for an article, and then the editor, I'll get back to the process more detail soon, the editor kind of then passes on the comments from the reviewer to the author. And I would say that in the case of Susan and myself, we often digest the comments from the reviewers to the author. We highlight what is important for us that the author is gonna do when revising the manuscript. Then, of course, the author is gonna respond after making the revisions back, both to us and to the reviewer. But let's have a look a little bit at the review process, right? So sorry, my PowerPoint seems to have some problem in moving ahead for some strange reason. Let me just stop sharing for a moment and let's try and reshare it, because otherwise we're not going to see. Okay, so first of all, as Bádélé also mentioned, is there an online submission system? Most journals nowadays do have an online submission system. So the first thing you need to do is actually to register on the system and submit to the system. If no, and this is again very, very unusual nowadays, is you send your article as a file to the email address given in the submission guidelines. Then what happens? You submit the manuscript, it's out of your hands. What are these editors gonna do? So typically the editor or the editors read the article and decide, they have to make a decision whether the article is reviewable or not. What does it mean? It means ultimately asking ourselves, shall we send it out for review or shall we reject it desktop? And this is very tricky because, for example, for Language in Society, we reject a lot of manuscripts desktop, though we do not even send them out to reviewers, because we believe that the articles should have never been sent to Language in Society. They should have been sent to other journals, because the authors haven't actually read the aims and scope of the journal, and so they submit manuscripts that are not appropriate for Language in Society. Let's see. So if we say no, so it's not reviewable, we typically write quite a nice email explaining why we are not sending out a manuscript for review. We also have to I also have to underscore that Language in Society has page number constraints. So there is only a certain amount of articles we can accept per year. We typically receive over a year approximately 300 articles, and we can only accept 20. So you understand that, you know, we cannot send out a lot of articles to review either, because we cannot accept many articles either. So if it's a desktop rejection, you know, we reject, and then you can take the manuscript and submit it to another journal. If it is reviewable, then we choose two reviewers. It's, in our case, it's double blind. We send out the manuscript for review, and on the basis of the reviews that we receive, we make a decision. And the decision can be reject, but it can, and then you then send it to another journal, or it can be minor, moderate, major, or revise and resubmit. So then you make the revision, and I will come back to the making the revision very soon, and then you resubmit the revised version to the journal, right? So this what's called also the second round. During the second round, different things can happen. So typically, if a manuscript was we said minor revisions, then when it comes back to us, we would look at the manuscript and then make a final decision. And typically, after minor revision, it is an acceptance, right? Or if the author hasn't done the homework properly, it could be you have to revise again, right? But if it was a decision of moderate, major, or especially revise and resubmit, so we would send the manuscript. We would send the manuscript back to the same reviewers who reviewed the manuscript in the first during the first round, right? So, and then what happens is that on the basis of the reviews, the reviews from the second round, the editor makes a final decision. And this again could be minor revisions. It could be, which then would lead most often in an acceptance. Or sometimes, after the second round, especially if it was a revise and resubmit, and the authors did not really revise their manuscript properly, it could end up either in a major revision, in a minor revision, or it could also end up in a rejection. So what is the role of the reviewer? What do these people do? Which ultimately, who are these people? It's us. It's not like some strange personalities. The same people who write articles are also the people who review articles. So typically, it's most the best reviewer would carefully read and assess the manuscript, check whether the article is sound in terms of theory, methodology, and particularly analysis, and then would give constructive suggestions for changes and improvements, right? And reviewers differ enormously in the level of detail, or the amount of comments they would give, but as I said, I mean, their role is really to check the manuscript carefully, and again, check the manuscript carefully against the backdrop of the aims and scope of the journal, right? So a reviewer, the same reviewer might have very different views of an article depending on the journal for whom the reviewer is reviewing. So it's not that there is like one standard review for one manuscript. It's more about how does this manuscript fit or potentially fit in the specific journal, right? Then, so the best review is typically thorough, detailed, engaged, and constructive, right? In the worst case scenario, the review can be harsh, scathing, and gatekeeping. And this is something that, of course, we do not recommend. Susan and I sometimes blacklist reviewers who have been unnecessarily scathing, unnecessarily harsh, who have used the power that lies with the reviewer, and then because it's anonymous, right? And so we certainly do not like harsh and scathing reviews, but now sometimes reviews need to be quite firm, especially if it is a rejection. One does not need to be harsh and scathing, but one can be firm about whether a manuscript should be rejected, because ultimately a very positive review, right? Because there's also sometimes reviewers who write positive reviews but then click on the reject button, right? On the reject, and so those are not helpful either, because if you are so positive and then you click on reject, it's very difficult for us editors to actually reject the manuscript. So how to handle these reviews? So let's look at two different. I mean, there's so many scenarios, and this is kind of a simplification of the scenario. So scenario one, the reviews are quite similar and constructive. You revise the paper and resubmit it. So this is really like the best scenario. To review, the reviewers say more or less the same thing or say different things, but they are aligned with each other. And then the editor kind of summarizes these reviews, and they say, okay, you need to do A, B, C, D. Then the scenario two is the reviews differ considerably, and I have received many reviews as an author in specific, where one reviewer says expand and the other one says cut, right? And the editor hasn't really said anything, right? So I mean, it's very important that you remember this is a dialogue. If the editor hasn't digested the reviews for you, if the editor has not given you a clear path, especially if there are two considerably different reviews, then you really have to ask for clarification from the editor to say, well, what shall I do here? Shall I expand? Shall I cut? Right? So even if you receive an extremely harsh review, I know it's easier said than done, right? But try to dissociate yourself from the text you have written. The critique is not against you as a person, right? It's about what you have written. And reviewers often disagree about articles. That's why there are editors. Editors are there exactly to try and mediate between the two reviewers and then between the reviewers and the author. As I said before, if the reviews are discordant and the editor does not give precise guidelines about how to go about, you really have to ask for clarity. The other thing that is really important is that try to address as many comments as you can. There is a tendency, I mean, I can speak out of my own experience as an author. You receive the comments, right? And sometimes the comments are many. You open the email from the editor, you look at the comments, and you just feel overwhelmed, completely overwhelmed. My suggestion is that just, read the comments, close that email, forget about it. So try not to get too upset. Forget about that email for a week, 10 days. Just reopen the email, go through the comments carefully, and you will see that the reviewers actually have given you quite some good comments, because we have to remember, and I'm sure that many in the audience, there might be many PhD students in the audience, that after the end of your PhD, there's no more supervisor. So when you are a PhD student, you have your supervisor who reads everything very carefully and give you comments. When you are a doctor, like, the only people who are going to read your work carefully are actually the reviewers. So and remember that the reviewing job is unpaid. So we do it as a service to the academic community. So we are all in it, right? And so don't just be too defensive, right? So try to address as many comments as you can, but you are allowed to disagree with the reviewers and argue for your position if you think that the reviewers actually have misunderstood something or have suggested something that you really cannot implement because it doesn't work with your article. So, but however, don't come across as someone who is not willing to take any critique. And so like, oh, no, I'm not going to do anything. And then the editor is going to say, well, just take the article and submit it to another journal. If you're not prepared to engage in this dialogue with the reviewer, then it's better that, withdraw the article. As I said, the reviewing process is a dialogue. And then just a couple of really suggestions. When you receive a letter from the editor with the reviews of your article, please acknowledge receipt of the email and say explicitly whether you are willing to do the revision or not. And instead you want to withdraw the paper. We send all these emails. We have taken a lot of time giving comments to the author, and we send it, especially if it's a revise and resubmit, and we never hear from the authors back. It's like, well, at least let us know whether you are willing to revise and resubmit it to us, or whether you want to take the manuscript to another journal. Just don't, silence is never really good. It's actually very impolite. And then when you submit your revisions, always please provide a letter in which you specify in a very detailed manner how you have handled the reviewer's critique. This letter is very useful to us editors, but it's also useful to the reviewers to see whether you have really done what they've asked you to do. And on here I close. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tommaso, and thanks to all three of you for a very insightful presentation. I like Sari's focus on the new knowledge. When you're writing an article, think about the new knowledge you intend to contribute. Thank you, bádélé, also for drawing our attention to predatory publishing and bringing us back to what we need to look out for. And Tommaso, what I love most about your presentation is the role of editors as mediators, So we have about 25 minutes to go, so we'll go straight on to the Q&A. I see that the chat room is already engaging. I hope we haven't, some of us haven't missed out on that. But let's There have been some questions already. Melissa, do you want to start with some in the chat room? I'm trying to pull out the one we had earlier on.
Just a moment. Sure. I mean, there were questions that were written through the Google Drive, and also that we can address. One is how important is it to publish on a wide range of topics?
Yeah. Anyone wants to take that?
As an early scholar, I'm assuming we don't. As an early scholar, how important do you think it is, speakers, to publish on a
wide range of topics? Who wants? Yeah, Tommaso. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean that's a tricky question in many ways. I mean my suggestion is more like try to publish in a wide range of journals rather than just send the same manuscript to one and to send different manuscripts to one and the same journal. So of course this also means that you should try and publish on a wide range of topics, because then different journals will accept different manuscripts. Yeah, I think it's important to show that you develop a certain breadth.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, anyone else wants to come in, because sometimes especially scholars, they are confused. Should we spread out or should we have a narrow focus? Sari?
Sari wanted to add something here.
Sorry.
So I think something in the middle. So not to stretch too wide, but not to stay too narrow either. So I think it could be helpful to think about what are the core expertise of your research and what is that field. Let's say that discourse studies, in my case, are sociolinguistics. But you could also think about maybe the institution or the geographical region. Maybe there is something that you can contribute there. So in my case, it's Arctic that I can contribute as well. And then maybe there is something that you can combine together with a colleague. For instance, I have worked a lot with Helen Kelly Holmes around minority language media. So, but that requires two of us to come together. So maybe just the different ways of trying to think how you can combine the knowledge that you have gained and contribute to the different fields.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me move to the next question. There was a question about what the editor can normally help the author with. So what is it that the author should come to the editor for help with, let's say via email, and what is the author expected to find out for him or herself? Yes, so bádélé, please go.
If I can also just briefly address the wide range of topics. For me, and I'll come to the second question as well in terms of helping the author. For me, I publish on a very wide range of topics that aren't even necessarily linguistics, because I'm in African studies. It affords me the opportunity to publish in areas dealing with history, dealing with politics. So I would say probably 25% of my research is in linguistics, while 75 is, across a wide range of even disciplines, again, because being an African studies, that it offers me that opportunity to do so legitimately, I should say. Apart from that, also, what we do in terms of helping authors, one is that we'll give them guidance from the outset in terms of whether or not what they are sending to us fits within the scope of the journal. Beyond that, there are other technical things such as anonymizing your paper. Some people don't know how to do that. In Microsoft Word, there's a built-in tool called Document Inspector
that will help you anonymize your paper to get it even ready for double-blind peer review, which is what we do. You know, other types of things are, I guess, sort of what we would rely more so on reviewers to do. But depending on, you know, various circumstances, we may read through the first draft of it and make some preliminary recommendations before it even goes to peer review. In some cases, the topic is very interesting, and, you know, I may feel like it is worthy of going to peer review, but until some formatting things are dealt with or other types of things like that, or until some of the citations are brought up to date. If your most recent citation is from the year 2000, you know, we're going to let you know about that, because otherwise it becomes a bit embarrassing if we send something out that has these glaring types of problems, and then the one who's doing the peer review has to point these out. So these are just some of the preliminary things I think that we do from the outset when things are submitted to even facilitate the peer review process going on later on. Okay.
Thank you. Let me ask this question, which is in the chat room. Before I get back to Melissa, it says that, have any of the speakers been rejected by journals before? Or is this something mostly experienced by young or early career researchers? So straight out questions. Have any of you been rejected before?
And how do we cope with rejections after first submissions or after revisions?
Tommaso? Is that a yes?
Yeah, I mean, I think that everyone is bound to be rejected at some point in their lives, you know, and everyone, I mean, I'm not sure, I cannot speak on behalf of bádélé or Sari, but, you know, yes, you know, I've had articles rejected, and it's perfectly fine, you know, it's just, and also the thing is that the more prolific you become, the more you write, the more the chances there are that you're going to get rejected. It's just like simple maths, right? So how to handle with the rejection? Well, you just have to accept that it's part of what we do, you know, and you have to ask yourself whether the rejection, whether it was sent to the wrong journal, and then you need to then send it to another journal that might instead be more suitable for your paper. So especially if it was a desktop rejection. If it was rejected after review, then the question is whether you should perhaps read the reviewer's comments very carefully and see whether there are things that you want to incorporate in your manuscript before you then submit it to another journal. So yeah, I mean, perhaps I'm not being so good at empathy here, but, you know, you just becomes like, you know, okay, it's part of life. It's part of your life as an academic, you know. We get rejected, we move on, you know. It's not the end of the career, of your career, you know. You should not just stop being an academic and, I don't know, I mean, what should I have done? Like, you know, after my first rejection, go and plow the fields? I would never be able to you know, become a peasant, right? You know, so you just move on. I just did something else, and I revised the article and submitted elsewhere. And there was an article actually that I agreed the article was not good enough, and actually I threw it away. You know, I never went on with that article. I wrote other articles that then got accepted.
I can continue. I have been rejected, and I'm sure I will be rejected also in the future. I do respond first very emotionally, so I do get angry and upset, and I translate that as a cleaning my house or weeding my bed flowers. I'll be sure to sleep on it for a couple of nights before engaging any email contact to anybody about it. And after I have kind of cooled down, then I try to read them very carefully. I make a bullet point list, what have been asked, and usually I do start to agree upon with them and see the light, how that might be worked in. If not, then I might ask help from my colleague or from the editor to explain if I don't understand what is asked from me. And usually even a longest review does not yield into a lots and lots and lots of work. It just feels like that at the beginning, but once you sleep on it and maybe break it down, it's usually manageable. And usually the article becomes better from the process.
All right. Thank you. I see that Neil has joined us. I think when I mentioned you in the beginning, you weren't here. Neil, can you say hello to us?
And Christian is here too.
Yeah. Yes, and Christian, yes. So maybe if you have something to say about some of these questions, please feel free to contribute. So Melissa, I have one more question here. It says that at a doctoral course, our teachers recommended us to look at the editorial board of a journal, and if we have cited at least one name, we should put the journal on our list of possible publication outlets. Would you agree on this? Is there not a risk that we then become part of a preaching to the already convinced culture, or do we have to start here and venture out later? Who would like to take that? Bádélé, yeah.
Yep, my hand was actually originally up for the rejection piece.
Oh, okay. You've also been rejected?
Never. No, I'm joking. No, I just wanted to share a few things. When I was doing my master's, I submitted a paper. It was my first linguistics paper, and it came back with so many red marks. It looked like it was bleeding on the surgery table. And you have two, or let me say, I had a couple of options. One is I would say, oh, I'm so bad, I can never do it. But I actually took every single suggestion into account. I incorporated it into that paper. And then that became the model paper that my professor ended up using for several years after that, right? Other people didn't take that, and that professor was known for doing that thing. Others didn't take it so well, and they just beat themselves up, and some even left the program. Similar with my lead supervisor for my PhD, Prof. Osam, they called him the chief tormentor. And my proposal was over 100 pages. And he said to one of his classes that, yes, this is the type of proposal that you people should write. You all are writing these lightweight proposals. It should be, substantive, so forth. So I was thinking, oh, this is good. This is a good sign. This, that means I'm in there. When that proposal came back, again, there were so many red marks on it, you thought it would have gotten shot with an AK-47. But once again, I took every single, one of the recommendations into account. And then that ended up winning the Vice Chancellor's Award for the best PhD thesis. Again, Prof. was one of my supervisors. So from there, what I learned was that I have the option to either take it as this breaks me down, I can never do it, or I can just, like Sari just said, you're mad at first, but then you take it in stride, and then you look at the rationale, you look at the logic of the points, and there's a proverb in Chi, and it translates to, when they're beating you on top of your head, they're making your neck stronger. And if we can take the reviewer comments like that okay, even if they want to, harm the top of your head, if you can take it like, I appreciate you making my neck stronger, then for articles and, so forth and so on, I think that you can come out with stronger papers, stronger theses, stronger articles, stronger book chapters, whatever is being reviewed, because literally they're taking the time out of their busy schedules to assist you to, produce something much better than it would have been otherwise.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Let's take some live questions. Is there anyone of the participants who wants to ask a question now before we run out of time? I think it would be nice to hear from one or two of the participants.
Ruth Oji.
Oh, Ruth. Okay. Yeah, Ruth, if it's possible, let's see you and kindly introduce yourself. Okay, so Ruth and Jafar. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I wouldn't be able to turn on my camera because of my network issues here. Okay. So I'd like to thank you for the insights shared so far.
Where are you tuned in from?
Okay, I'm from Nigeria. I'm from Lagos here in Nigeria. I'm at the Pan-Atlantic University in Lagos, Nigeria here.
Okay, please be brief with your question. Thank you.
Okay, it's actually a comment. I was just wondering whether our reviewers can be a bit kinder. Yes, it's true that most times when the comments come back, it could be like piercing needles all over one's body. But I mean, if they could add a bit of tact and kindness to it, I think it would be a lot easier to manage, especially because of mental health issues nowadays. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Neil, can reviewers be a bit kinder? You want to say something?
I think Neil isn't present anymore.
He is. I actually see him.
Oh.
Always kind as a reviewer. I think there's a tendency probably to, when you're asked to review something, maybe you know, it does irk you sometimes, and you think, why are they writing it? Like, you know, and you maybe are not as kind as you probably should be. But I've had papers rejected, and sometimes it means that you're doing the wrong kind of work, and maybe the world isn't ready for what you're doing, or maybe you're out of step. And sometimes, as Tommaso said, you just have to throw the paper away and move your focus elsewhere.
Thank you. Jafar?
Yes, Prof. Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, I'm Jafar from Nigeria, Gombe State precisely. Actually, I don't have any question to ask, but perhaps to thank you and all the presenters. Honestly, mine too will not be so distant from my friend Grace from Lagos. You know, we the young scholars are kind of eager to get our work published and this kind of thing. So one will just feel, is it hatred or just unnecessary criticism? But notwithstanding, I may need to actually call again on our viewers to please sometimes be polite, at least please also that we'll be encouraged to address some of the comments. Actually, I was pleased to receive some comments just a few minutes ago, although my paper was rejected, but I feel actually pleased by the kind of manner I was addressed and all that. So I sincerely appreciate my presence here. Thank you, Ma.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that Tommaso mentioned that for their journal, they'll usually blacklist harsh, scathing reviewers and reviewers who really want to be gatekeepers. And I was absolutely glad to hear about that. Yes, you can be critical, but you don't have to be nasty, right?
Thank you.
Dawson.
Hello. I'm a PhD student from the University of South Carolina in the linguistics program. I want to thank you guys. And I had a question about when you're working on a project, you're developing a manuscript, maybe you're presenting at conferences, trying to improve the project. How do you know when it's ready to go ahead and submit to a journal? Should you develop it until it's, you know, as good as it can be before you submit it, or should you submit earlier in the process so you can get that feedback and get that useful reviewer comments to improve the project?
Okay, so when do you let go? Who will take that one? Yes, Tommaso.
Again, I think I would want to bring you back to what Sari said. You know, it's like, do you have an argument to make? If you have an argument to make, then it's ready to submit, right? You know, but if you don't have an argument to make backed by existing data, then it's not ready to submit. And especially in the case for language in society, you know, the question is, are you making a big argument? Are you pushing the field Are you trying to push the field towards new direction? Are you engaging with current theoretical debates? And if the answer is yes, then okay, ready to submit. If the answer is no, then you either go with another journal or you just have to work on it more.
Thank you, Sari.
I agree with what Tommaso was saying. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be solid on each aspect of it.
Great. Bádélé?
Yes, this is interesting because this deals with how I actually tend to write my articles, is that I'll give a presentation and, basically sequence everything logically, so forth and so on. And I feel like if I can articulate it, then usually it's something that I could make into a paper. So what I do is I'll tend to have one of my graduate students transcribe that talk, right? Whatever the topic may be, transcribe the talk. And then from there, I'll put in where the citations go. I'll put in the different section headers and so forth and so on. So the majority of I would say maybe not the majority, at least half of the papers that I've written have come directly from the talks that I've given. So for me, once I've been able to articulate it verbally and then gotten sometimes feedback in the course of that presentation, it's just a matter of reformatting it from a more conversational style from the presentation to a more scholarly type of style for the paper, and then I'll submit it there. From there, whatever the reviewers may or may not say, again, that can help me. But that's something that I've found to be very helpful. I'm 8 years in as a professor, and people wonder, how am I able to write so copiously? And literally, what I'll do is whoever transcribes it, that becomes my co-author. And now I'm actually helping junior researchers as well in that process. So I would say if you can articulate it, if it makes sense, reformat it and then go, forward with that.
Okay, thank you. Let me I don't see any more hands up. Let me do a final question here. How important are presentations, conference presentations, seminar presentations? How important are they in the article development process?
Well, I can make a start. So I guess it depends on what kind of a writer you are. I think it's good always to put it out there and test it. Maybe sometimes it's most beneficial to yourself, that you can hear yourself how it sounds, and you can feel where the argument is solid and where it doesn't work. However, I guess personally, I'm that kind of a writer that for me, the conference and seminar presentations are more for finding people with whom I can have a conversation rather than the actual writing process.
Tommaso?
Okay, so I just want to share a personal story, and I don't want to scare people unnecessarily, but what happened to me once is that I gave a presentation at a conference, and I always give a presentation with a script. And then someone published my paper in another language. So I am not saying that, and it took me 2.5 years to kind of recover from that shock. It also meant that I had to. It's very difficult to start legal process because it's actually an idea plagiarism rather than a total plagiarism, a total so what happened is that I had to practically re-theorize my paper, because then if I ended up like publishing the paper, then the other authors, then they could accuse me of plagiarize them in the end, right? So anyway, so my point is that just be careful about your presentations a bit. I still believe that we should present at conferences, but I also want to make people aware that this can happen. It has happened to me. And yeah, And I guess it took me also a long time to actually share this story.
Wow, that's a very important lesson there for all of us. How much scripting do we do when we put our ideas out when they are not yet ready to go for publications? Thank you all very much. We spent 90 minutes, so we're wrapping up. And so I would like to give each three of our facilitators the option of a final word in 30 seconds or a minute maximum. Sari, will you go first?
I thank you again about this opportunity, and I also want to say as a final thought that please try to enjoy the activity of thinking, reading, and writing.
Thank you. Bádélé?
Once again, I appreciate the opportunity. I hope it's been beneficial to those attendees who are able to come here. You know, I'm very passionate about my editorial work as I am with my authorial work. So yeah, I think that the more that we can have these opportunities to come together, to share, to reflect, you know, is ultimately beneficial for those of us who are presenting as well as those who are in the audience. So once again, I appreciate the invitation.
Thank you. Tommaso?
Yeah, thank you very much. I loved it, and I love sharing the thoughts with my colleagues, and it was a lovely discussion. And I just say, I just want to say, you know, write, and submit your articles. And yeah, that's what you should be doing.
All right. Thank you to our facilitators and our participants. Thank you for being part of this process. I hope that there are certain lessons that you have taken from here which would enrich the process that you are going through to become established authors. And so, as Tommaso said, write, let it go. When it is solid enough, let it go, and don't be afraid of rejection. We've all been through it, and that's part of the process of the making of an established scholar. Let me also thank Melissa, Neil, and Christiane for being part of this whole process. And hopefully we will do this again. Thank you. Good evening and good night, wherever you are. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.